When I tell you that I won a $100 million lottery by repeating only 7 words every night, you might think it's impossible. But the truth is, I didn't win because of luck, numbers, or chance. I won because I learned how to command my inner world until the outer world had no choice but to obey. You see, the universe doesn't respond to desperate wishes or casual hopes, it responds to conviction. Every night, as I lay in bed, I didn't pray for the money, I felt the possession of it. I lived inside the experience before it was visible. My senses were saturated with the feeling of wealth. My emotions, my imagination, my heart, all were aligned with one truth: it is already mine. The 7 words I repeated weren't magical in sound, their power came from the belief behind them. They became a rhythm that lulled my conscious mind to sleep while awakening my deeper self, the part of me that creates worlds. Each repetition carved a new reality into my subconscious. Each night, the invisible took form. I didn't chase the win, I became the one who had already won. And one morning, the world caught up. My name was drawn. My numbers appeared. But the real miracle wasn't the ticket, it was the realization that I had always been the source. Stay with me until the end, and I'll reveal the 7 words that turned imagination into $100 million reality. You must understand, my friend, the secret was never in the numbers, the cards, or the chance. It was always within the consciousness that directed them. You see, I did not win because of a ticket, I won because of a state of being. When I speak of the 7 words I repeated every night, people expect some mystical chant or hidden code, but what truly happened was far more divine and intimate. Those words became a bridge between the seen and the unseen, between desire and realization. Every night, as the world went silent and the hum of day faded into stillness, I would close my eyes and enter that sacred space within myself, the space where imagination is not a dream, but a living power. I understood that every word spoken with conviction is a seed planted in the fertile soil of the subconscious. These 7 words were my seeds, and I did not whisper them with doubt or hope. I declared them with quiet certainty. I knew that repetition is not about begging life to change, it is about persuading the mind until it knows it has already changed. I did not repeat the words as a plea, but as an affirmation of what was already true in my inner world. When I said them, I felt the weight of the truth behind them. I saw myself holding the winning ticket. I felt the thrill of victory move through my body. My heart raced with the same pulse it would have when the news broke. I saw the numbers flash before my eyes, not as a wish, but as an inevitability. Most people speak their desires as if they are missing something, as if what they want is outside of them. But the moment you feel lack, you announce to the universe that you do not have it, and the universe must agree. I did the opposite. I spoke as one who already possessed it. I repeated those words until I could no longer tell whether they were imagination or memory, and that is when the miracle began. You see, language has vibration, and vibration has form. Every word carries emotion, and emotion is the key that unlocks manifestation. When I said those 7 words, I wasn't performing a ritual. I was feeling creation into being. The world within me was rearranging itself to match the conviction I held. Night after night, the invisible architect, my subconscious mind, went to work. It needed no instruction, only the feeling of completion. There was no tension, no waiting. I would say the words, let the feeling rise, and then surrender to sleep. That state between waking and dreaming, that is where the magic happens. That is where your imagination becomes the blueprint of your reality. Every night I entered that twilight zone, carrying the vibration of already having. I didn't fall asleep as someone who wanted to win. I fell asleep as someone who had already won. And in that state, something shifted. Life around me began to echo the truth I had accepted. Random conversations, unexpected meetings, small synchronicities all started to move in alignment with the belief I had impressed upon myself. People call it coincidence. I call it evidence. Evidence that consciousness is the only cause, and that the outer world is but a mirror reflecting the inner assumption. The secret behind the 7 words is not the words themselves, but the energy that gives them life. You could speak the same phrase for years without change if you do not feel it. The words must be alive within you. They must stir your being until they feel like truth. When I said them, I didn't analyze, I didn't doubt, I didn't watch the calendar. I knew. The conviction was so real that the outer result became only a matter of time. The human mind loves complexity, but truth is beautifully simple. Creation begins in the imagination, and the imagination responds to belief. I shaped those 7 words into a melody that carried belief deeper into my subconscious each night. The rhythm, the emotion, the imagery all worked together until my inner world became saturated with one reality. I had won. So when the world finally mirrored that belief, I wasn't shocked. I wasn't trembling in disbelief. I simply smiled because I had already lived that moment countless times within. The excitement others saw was only the echo of a truth I had accepted long ago. The ticket, the money, the applause, they were symbols, reflections, shadows of an inner certainty that had taken form. And so I say to you, it was never about luck. It was never about chance. The secret was in the repetition of belief, in speaking words that aligned with the feeling of fulfillment. The 7 words I spoke each night were nothing without the state I entered, that deep conviction that what I desired was already mine. It was that invisible faith, that silent knowing, that turned a mere sentence into a creative command. The outer event, winning the $100 million, was simply the physical proof of an inner victory that had already been won. For once you understand that your imagination is not fantasy but creation, that your words are not empty but powerful, you hold in your hands the very key to reshape your life. And it begins, as it did for me, with the gentle repetition of a truth you dare to believe before the world confirms it. You may wonder how belief alone could bend something as solid as reality, how thought could mold the tangible world. Yet the truth is this: everything you see, everything you touch, every experience you call real, first existed in the unseen realm of assumption. The moment you assume something to be true with unwavering faith, creation begins to rearrange itself to match that inner conviction. I did not wait for the world to prove it to me. I proved it to myself first, within the quiet chambers of imagination. Assumption is not pretending. It is not wishing. It is a deep acceptance that what you desire is already so. When I lay in bed each night, repeating my 7 words, I wasn't hoping to win. I assumed that I had already won. I didn't question how or when. I didn't trace the path of the outcome. I let the feeling of fulfillment dominate my inner vision. And as I lived in that assumption, life began to bend toward me effortlessly, obediently, faithfully. The power of assumption is absolute because it works through the only creative force there is, your consciousness. Everything that exists began as an assumption held long enough to harden into fact. Most people wait for evidence before they believe, but the wise reverse this order. They believe first, and then evidence follows. I believed that wealth was already mine. I felt the soft leather of the chair in my new home, smelled the crisp paper of the check, saw my name printed boldly as the winner. I rehearsed my joy, not as fantasy, but as memory. It is a sacred paradox. You must believe in something unseen until it becomes seen. Most struggle with this because they have been taught to worship facts, to live by what the senses dictate. But the senses only echo the past. They cannot reveal the new until the new is born in you. When I assumed that I was already wealthy, my outer world had to yield to that inner transformation. People, circumstances, events, they all conspired to align with my belief. The assumption became gravity, pulling everything necessary into my orbit. When you assume, you are not deceiving yourself. You are awakening the truth that your imagination creates reality. The outer world is a shadow of your inner conviction. It has no power of its own. It only mirrors what you believe to be true. If you assume poverty, lack, or struggle, life will obediently mirror that. But if you assume wealth, joy, and success with unshakable conviction, the universe will echo it back in equal measure. It cannot do otherwise. There were nights when doubts whispered in my ear, when reason mocked my belief. How could 7 words change the course of life? It would say, but I silenced those voices by turning inward. I reminded myself that reason is bound by what has been, while faith sees what is becoming. Reason observes, faith creates, and so I persisted in assumption until it became my reality. The beauty of assumption is its simplicity. You do not need complex rituals, you do not need to beg, you do not need to struggle. You need only to accept fully, emotionally, and completely that what you desire is already yours. It is done. It exists. Your task is to feel it real. Feel it so deeply that your subconscious cannot tell the difference between imagination and experience. Once that happens, the world must obey, for the subconscious is the womb of creation. Each morning, I carried my assumption into the day. I did not check the lottery numbers with anxiety. I walked with quiet confidence. I smiled as though I already knew the outcome. I felt gratitude not because I hoped something would happen, but because it already had in the unseen. My assumption was not a passing thought. It was a living state. I dwelt in it. I breathed it. I became it. And that is the secret. You must become the embodiment of your wish fulfilled. To assume is to step into a new identity, not to play a role, but to become the person who already possesses what they desire. When I assumed wealth, I no longer thought like a man seeking fortune. I thought like one who already had it. My actions, emotions, and expectations shifted to match that state. Life responded by arranging itself to prove me right. Every assumption, whether good or bad, calls forth its own evidence. The universe is not selective. It simply reflects. If you believe you are unloved, you will see it. If you believe you are abundant, you will see that too. You cannot escape the mirror. You can only change what it reflects. And the only way to change it is to assume differently, to believe differently, to be differently. So, I did not win by wishing or waiting. I won by assuming. I lived in the end so completely that there was no difference between imagination and reality. My assumption was the law, and everything else obeyed it. That is how belief bends reality, not by forcing the world to change, but by transforming the world within you until the outer world has no choice but to follow. There comes a moment when the assumption becomes so vivid, so alive within you, that you no longer wait for it, you live in it. You breathe it. You walk through your day as though the miracle has already unfolded, and that is the moment creation begins to move with unstoppable momentum. This is what it means to live in the end. It is not about hoping for a result, it is about surrendering to the reality of its completion within yourself. When I lived in the end, I no longer thought of winning, I thought from the state of already having won. My inner conversations changed. My emotions shifted. My imagination began to create scenes that belonged only to a man who had already received his fortune. I would sit quietly, close my eyes, and see myself standing on a stage, holding the ticket, hearing the cheers, feeling the heat of the lights, sensing the weight of destiny fulfilled. I could hear the voice announcing my name. I could smell the scent of new beginnings in the air. And in those moments, I was not imagining for the future. I was remembering what had already happened. This is the secret of living in the end. You must remember forward. You must recall your desire as though it were a memory, not a wish. When you live from the end, you bypass the question of how entirely, because in the end it is already done. The mind can no longer argue with it. The heart accepts it as truth. And once your heart accepts, life must comply. Each time I entered that inner scene, I gave it more detail, more life, more emotion. I would feel the coolness of the check paper against my fingertips, the hum of excitement in my chest, the laughter of those around me congratulating me. These were not fantasies, they were rehearsals of reality. My subconscious, unable to tell the difference between imagination and experience, accepted them as fact. And from that acceptance, creation began. There was no struggle in this process, no desperate trying. The effort is not in making it happen, but in remaining faithful to the state of fulfillment. That is where most falter. They believe for a moment, and then slip back into the doubt of waiting. But you must live as though the world has already shifted in your favor. Walk as the one who has already received. Speak as the one whose prayer is complete. Feel as the one who stands on the mountain, not the one climbing it. I remember one night, lying in bed after saying my 7 words, I felt something extraordinary. A calm certainty flooded me, as if an invisible hand had sealed the promise. I could no longer imagine not winning. The thought felt foreign, impossible. I had crossed the line between desire and fulfillment. I had entered the end and made it home. That night I slept in peace, not because I hoped, but because I knew. Living in the end also means you stop checking for signs. You do not measure progress. You do not question timing. You simply remain in the knowing. The tree does not dig up its seed to see if it has sprouted. It trusts the soil, the rain, the sun. And so must you trust the unseen forces working on your behalf. The moment you dwell consistently in the end, everything else begins to fall into place with effortless grace. Days began to move differently. Conversations, once ordinary, became meaningful. People appeared who unknowingly played roles in bringing my assumption to life. I didn't force a single thing. I simply observed as the outer world rearranged itself in ways too perfect to be coincidence. The news, the opportunity, the exact sequence that led to my winning it all arrived like clockwork, as though written by an unseen author. But that author was me, writing in the language of imagination. Living in the end is the purest act of faith, for it requires you to close your physical eyes to the world of facts and open the inner eye to the world of truth. The truth that your desire already exists, that it is complete, whole, and waiting only for your recognition. You must claim it now, not later. You must feel it now, not when evidence appears, because the outer evidence is nothing but a delayed echo of your inner acceptance. As I moved through my days, I felt a quiet delight in every small thing. Even ordinary moments glowed with the sense of something magnificent already unfolding. I no longer saw myself as someone striving to achieve. I was someone remembering the completion of a promise. That shift changed everything. My posture, my energy, my tone all carried the vibration of someone who had already received. And here lies the essence of creation. The end contains the beginning. If you live in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, You call forth its unfolding in this world. You no longer look ahead for what's coming. You look around and recognize it is already here, taking form before your very eyes. That is the art of living in the end, to let imagination precede manifestation, to let the unseen define the seen, to let faith sculpt fact. And it was in those nights, in that stillness between waking and sleeping, where the true power of creation revealed itself to me. The nighttime became my sacred ground, the doorway between the seen and the unseen. In that gentle descent into sleep, when the mind grows soft and the body releases its grip on the world, the subconscious stands open, listening, ready to receive whatever impression you choose to give it. It does not question, it does not argue, it simply accepts and creates. That is why I call the night the most powerful gateway for transformation. When I understood this, I began to treat those final moments before sleep as the holiest time of my day. I no longer allowed idle thoughts to wander in that space. I no longer fell asleep worrying about tomorrow, about bills, or about chance. No, I entered that sacred threshold with purpose. I closed my eyes, silenced the noise of the outer world, and let my imagination take command. I became the artist of my inner landscape, painting the scene of my fulfilled desire with feeling as my brush. Every night I would lie still and repeat my 7 words slowly, softly, letting their rhythm guide me into a deeper state of calm. I did not rush. I allowed each word to sink into the depths of my being until it no longer felt like repetition but realization. My body would relax, my breath would slow, and I would drift into the awareness of already having received. It was no longer about convincing myself. It was about remembering what was already true. The state between waking and sleep, that twilight, that edge of consciousness, is the golden door through which all creation enters. In that drowsy calm, the conscious mind loosens its grip, and the subconscious, the builder of your world, stands open and receptive. Whatever image or feeling you impress upon it in that moment becomes the pattern of your reality. The world, without fail, must later mirror what was impressed there. So I began to fall asleep as the man who had already won. I did not say, I will win. I said, I have won. I did not imagine myself waiting for the result. I imagined myself living the result. I felt the soft glow of satisfaction as I saw the numbers aligned, as I watched the announcement on the screen, as I heard the joyful voices celebrating my success. I felt the excitement, the freedom, the relief, all of it, as though it were happening that very night. And something remarkable began to happen. The more I repeated this ritual, the more natural it became. What once felt like imagination began to feel like memory. The line between someday and now disappeared. My subconscious accepted the new identity completely, and once it accepted, the world outside had no choice but to conform. Most people fall asleep replaying the worries of their day. They dwell on what went wrong, on who hurt them, on what they lack. And so they plant seeds of the same experiences into tomorrow. But when you choose to end each day in the feeling of your wish fulfilled, you rewrite the future before it arrives. The night is your workshop, your altar, your silent partner in creation. What you do in that last conscious moment shapes what you awaken to. I would often whisper to myself, tonight I plant wealth. Tonight I sleep in victory. And as I drifted deeper, I could feel an invisible current carrying me, as if the universe itself was cradling my assumption. My dreams would often reflect my state. I'd see myself living freely, laughing, moving through a world that already mirrored my inner wealth. It was as though my imagination was rehearsing the life that was soon to come. It is in that subtle moment, when you are neither fully awake nor fully asleep, that your inner speech becomes law. Your words become form. Your emotions become the blueprint of your reality, so you must guard that moment with reverence. Never close your eyes in fear or doubt. Fall asleep only in the feeling of having what you desire. Fall asleep as the person you intend to be, not the person you think you are. For it is the subconscious that creates, and the subconscious only acts on what it is impressed with. The nighttime is your audience with the infinite. Each time you surrender to sleep, you are entering the creative workshop of the divine. So I treated it with care, with devotion. I never fell asleep empty. I always carried an image, a scene, a feeling of completion with me into that depth. And each morning as I woke, I could feel the residue of that reality lingering, the peace, the quiet knowing, the sense that something unseen had shifted. Life began to respond more swiftly, more accurately. I realized I was no longer trying to attract, I was simply awakening to what I had already accepted in sleep. And it was in those sacred nights, in that sweet surrender between thought and dream, that the foundation of my $100 million victory was truly laid. There is a moment, after the scene has been fully lived within, when words become unnecessary and only feeling remains. Feeling is the secret key. It is the invisible vibration that calls the unseen into form. Thought paints the picture, but emotion gives it life. You may imagine wealth, love, or success all you wish, but until you feel its reality, until the emotion of fulfillment moves through you, it cannot take root. The feeling is the bridge between imagination and manifestation. Each night, after repeating my 7 words and entering that drowsy state of surrender, I would no longer think about the lottery or the numbers. I would let myself sink into the feeling of having already received it. I would feel the thrill in my chest, the warmth of joy rising through me, the deep calm that comes with knowing that life has answered my desire. It was not excitement born of hope, but the serene confidence of accomplishment, that feeling that certainty was the language my subconscious understood. You see, emotion is the proof of belief. It is not enough to say, "I have it." You must feel the truth of those words until your whole body vibrates with agreement. When I felt the joy of my victory, it was as if every cell of my being began to harmonize with that frequency. The energy within me changed, and because all things are connected, the energy around me began to respond. The world you see is nothing more than crystallized emotion. Change the feeling, and the world must change to match it. So I learned not to chase results, but to dwell in the emotion of fulfillment. Whenever doubt whispered, I did not argue with it. I simply returned to the feeling of freedom, abundance, and gratitude. I would close my eyes for a moment, breathe deeply, and feel the lightness that comes from being complete. That emotion became my home, my natural state. And once it became natural within me, life began to reflect it effortlessly. There were times during the day when the old thoughts would try to intrude. Fear would creep in, reminding me of statistics, of odds, of impossibility. But I would not entertain them. Instead, I'd quietly remind myself that my world was shaped not by numbers, but by the quality of my inner feeling. So I would smile gently, as one who already knew the outcome, and re-enter the state of joy. Within moments, the fear dissolved, and I was once again anchored in faith. It is a beautiful paradox. The more you feel your wish fulfilled, the less you care whether it appears, because deep inside, you already know it has. And that surrender, that release of urgency, is what allows it to come swiftly. The universe does not respond to longing, it responds to completion. It listens not to words but to vibration, not to effort but to ease. I remember one evening vividly. I lay in bed and whispered my 7 words, and then I let go completely. I felt an overwhelming gratitude, not a gratitude of waiting, but of receiving. I felt tears in my eyes, not from hope, but from realization. I knew I had already crossed the invisible threshold. I no longer needed proof. I no longer searched for signs. I was content, full, and complete. That emotion of gratitude was so profound that it seemed to radiate through the room. The air felt alive. My heart beat in rhythm with something vast and unseen. Gratitude became my evidence. It is impossible to feel thankful for something unreal. When you feel gratitude for something you have imagined, you are declaring to creation that it already exists. That is how powerful emotion is. It convinces the subconscious of reality far more deeply than words ever could. Every morning after those nights, I would awaken with a quiet joy. I no longer felt the impatience that once haunted me. There was no need to force anything. The emotion of fulfillment had become my new identity. I walked through the world as one who already had what he desired. My actions were gentle, my thoughts peaceful. And that peace began to magnetize the very circumstances that would bring the unseen into sight. When you feel it real, you are no longer a seeker, you are a creator. You move from wishing to knowing, from asking to claiming. The feeling of the wish fulfilled is the pulse of creation itself. The same energy that shapes galaxies flows through your conviction. Once you feel something deeply enough, you have already created it. Time is simply catching up. So I did not wait for my victory to make me feel joy. I allowed joy to announce my victory. I did not wait for wealth to give me peace. I became peaceful, and wealth followed. Emotion is cause, not effect. Whatever you feel persistently, the world must mirror. And when the feeling of fulfillment becomes stronger than the memory of lack, manifestation is inevitable. That is why I tell you, never underestimate the power of feeling. It is the language of creation, the heartbeat of the divine. When you speak to the subconscious, do not speak with empty words. Speak with the fire of emotion. Feel your desire as real now. Live inside its joy. Breathe its certainty. And you will find that the world bends quietly to meet the vibration you have claimed within. And as the emotion deepened and the state of fulfillment became natural, I discovered the final movement in this divine process, the art of letting go and allowing. There comes a moment when your inner work is complete, when the seed has been planted, watered, and nourished through faith and feeling. At that moment, the only thing left to do is release it to the unseen, to trust the law that governs all creation. You cannot dig up the seed every morning to check its progress. You must rest in certainty, knowing that growth is taking place beyond your sight. Letting go does not mean forgetting your desire. It means releasing your grip on how it should come, when it should appear, or through whom it should unfold. It means surrendering the details to the higher order of life, the same intelligence that spins galaxies and blossoms flowers. Once you have impressed the image upon the subconscious and sealed it with emotion, the work is no longer yours to do. Creation moves quietly beneath the surface, aligning all things in perfect rhythm to bring your assumption into being. So I stopped checking for evidence. I stopped watching for signs. I stopped wondering when. I began to live freely, joyfully, as though nothing was missing. When I released the need to control, everything began to flow. It was as if the universe sighed in relief, finally free to deliver what I had already claimed. I walked in faith, not as one waiting for a miracle, but as one who had already received it, and now simply watched it unfold in its appointed hour. There is a peace that follows true surrender, a deep calm that cannot be shaken by appearances. I felt that peace settle over me like a gentle mist. I knew that even if the outer world showed no sign, it was already done in the unseen. I no longer measured progress by time or circumstance. I measured it by the steadiness of my faith. I did not chase, I allowed. I did not struggle, I rested. I trusted that the same power that shaped my imagination was shaping my reality. One morning, I remember waking with an unusual stillness inside me. It was as if all striving had ceased. There was no urgency, no impatience, only a quiet knowing. I went about my day with ease, greeting each moment with gratitude. Even when I thought of the lottery, I felt nothing but completion. It was no longer a dream, it was a fact. That inner certainty was unshakable, and it radiated through every part of my life. Then, without warning, the outer world began to respond. Conversations led to opportunities. Subtle nudges drew me to places and moments that would never have occurred otherwise. Every event, every coincidence, every encounter began to align in ways too deliberate to dismiss. The invisible hand that I had trusted was guiding every detail, and all I had to do was follow the flow. I realized then that surrender is not passive, it is the most powerful state of alignment. It means becoming one with the rhythm of creation. The beauty of letting go is that it frees the imagination to work unbound. When you stop worrying about the outcome, the subconscious performs its magic unobstructed. It begins to rearrange the world with effortless precision. The phone call, the meeting, the circumstance, all of it is drawn to you without force, without struggle. The outer world is only a mirror. It cannot resist reflecting what the inner world has accepted. I watched as everything unfolded naturally, gracefully, like a script already written. And when the news finally arrived, when I saw the numbers, when I realized that I had indeed won, there was no shock, no disbelief, only a deep, quiet recognition. I had already lived it so many times in consciousness that the event felt like the closing of a story I had long finished writing. The victory had been won long before the world confirmed it. That is the essence of letting go, to move beyond need, beyond doubt, beyond time, to rest in the certainty that what is imagined in faith is already finished in creation. The world does not create your desire, it only reveals it. So you must not force or demand, you must allow. Just as night follows day, the unseen becomes seen when you stop trying to make it happen and simply trust that it has already happened. Letting go is love in action. It is saying to the universe, I trust you. I know this is mine, I release it now into your hands. And with that trust, the heart becomes light, the mind still, and the soul ready to receive. In that surrender, all resistance dissolves, and life begins to flow with divine order. You no longer chase manifestation. It comes to you gently, inevitably, drawn by the certainty of your inner knowing. So I let go, not by giving up, but by knowing deeply that there was nothing left to give up. It was done, it had always been done, and in that release, I found the true secret that manifestation is never about making something happen. It is about allowing what already exists within you to take form before your eyes. When you trust completely, the universe moves swiftly, quietly, perfectly, to show you that faith was always the master key.